When love quietly starts breaking. People think relationships end because of huge arguments. But most of the time, they end slowly. Quietly. Like a crack in glass spreading so gently you don't notice it until the whole thing shatters. My wife Laura and I had been married for 11 years. We met when we were both 26. Back then everything about life felt exciting. We had dreams of traveling together, buying a house, and building a life that felt safe and happy. Laura had this bright energy about her. She laughed easily, sometimes at the smallest things. Even when life was stressful, she could turn an ordinary moment into something warm and meaningful. That was one of the reasons I fell in love with her. For many years, our marriage felt strong. We weren't perfect, of course. No marriage is. But we respected each other. We supported each other. When one of us had a difficult day, the other would listen. Those simple things kept our relationship alive. Or at least, that's what I believed. About a year before everything ended, small changes started appearing in our lives. At first, they seemed harmless. Laura began spending more time on her phone. She used to leave it lying around the house without thinking about it. Now she always kept it close. Sometimes I noticed her smiling while looking at the screen. But whenever I asked what she was reading, she would quickly lock the phone and say, "Just something funny from work." I didn't question it. Because when you trust someone, you naturally give them space. Over the next few months, another change appeared. Laura started coming home later from work. Sometimes she said there were meetings. Sometimes she said coworkers invited her to dinner. Occasionally she said there was simply too much work to leave early. At first I admired her dedication. But slowly something began to feel different. She stopped talking about her day the way she used to. Before, she would tell me stories about coworkers, office drama, and funny situations. Now her answers were short. Just a normal day. Or nothing interesting happened. The warmth in our conversations started disappearing. And yet, I kept telling myself everything was fine. Because the alternative was too painful to consider. One evening something happened that I couldn't ignore. Laura had fallen asleep on the couch while watching television. The living room was dim except for the blue glow of the TV screen. I was sitting at the dining table checking emails when I heard a buzzing sound. Her phone vibrated on the coffee table. The screen lit up. I didn't mean to look. But the message appeared clearly on the screen. "I miss you already." My chest tightened instantly. For a few seconds I couldn't breathe properly. I stared at the message as if it might disappear if I looked away. But it didn't. 6 simple words. 6 words that shattered 11 years of trust. I didn't unlock the phone. I didn't scroll through the messages. Because in that moment, I realized something painful. I didn't actually need more proof. Sometimes one small glimpse of truth is enough to reveal everything. I sat there for nearly an hour, listening to Laura breathe softly as she slept. The woman I loved was only a few feet away. But suddenly she felt like a stranger. That night was the longest night of my life. I lay awake in bed staring at the ceiling while Laura slept peacefully beside me. My mind replayed every moment from the past year. Every late night. Every secret smile. Every short answer. Slowly, painfully, the puzzle pieces began fitting together. And the picture they formed broke my heart. The next morning Laura behaved exactly the same as always. She kissed my cheek before leaving for work. "See you tonight," she said. I nodded. But something inside me had already changed. For the next 2 days, I watched her more carefully. Not in an angry way. Just quietly observing. And the more I observed, the clearer everything became. She guarded her phone. Constantly. She stepped outside to answer calls. She smiled at messages she never explained. By the 3rd day, I realized something important. Even if I confronted her, the trust between us was already gone. And without trust, a marriage becomes an empty shell. That evening I packed a small travel bag. Laura noticed immediately. "Going somewhere?" she asked while pouring coffee in the kitchen. "Work trip," I said calmly. She looked at the bag for a moment and nodded. "All right. When will you be back?" "I'm not sure." "Okay." That was all she said. No concern. No curiosity. No attempt to stop me. That moment hurt more than anything else. Because it made me realize something painful. Maybe she had already accepted the end of our marriage long before I did. An hour later I left the house. I drove aimlessly for hours. Eventually I reached a quiet town nearly 3 hours away and checked into a small roadside motel. The room was simple and slightly worn, but it gave me something I desperately needed. Space. For the next 3 days, I lived inside my thoughts. I walked through nearby parks. I sat in diners drinking endless cups of coffee. I replayed 11 years of memories again and again. The good moments hurt the most. Because they reminded me of what we had lost. But the most painful realization came on the third day. Laura hadn't called me once. No messages. No questions. No concern. Just silence. And that silence told me everything. On the fourth morning, I finally picked up my phone. It was time to call my wife. The phone call that ended our marriage. My hands felt heavy as I stared at Laura's name on my phone. 11 years of memories were connected to that single contact. For a moment, I almost convinced myself to hang up before dialing. But deep down I knew something important. Avoiding the truth wouldn't change it. So I pressed the call button. The phone rang once. Twice. Then Laura answered. "Hey." Her voice sounded calm. Almost as if she had been expecting the call. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Finally I said the words I had been rehearsing in my head for 3 days. "I'm not coming back." Silence filled the line. I expected confusion. Maybe anger. But instead, Laura sighed quietly. "I figured," she said. Those 2 words hit me harder than any confession could have. "You knew?" I asked slowly. "Yes." Another long pause followed. "I was wondering when you'd realize," she whispered. Hearing that hurt more than discovering the message. Because it meant the truth had been sitting between us for months. "How long?" I asked. "About 5 months." 5 months. Nearly half a year of lies, secrets, and quiet betrayal. She explained everything slowly. The man was a co-worker. Their friendship began with simple conversations during lunch breaks. Then longer talks after work. Eventually those talks turned into something more emotional. And finally, something physical. "I never planned for it," Laura said softly. "But it just happened." That sentence is something many people say when they're trying to explain betrayal. But hearing it doesn't make the pain any smaller. "Were you ever going to tell me?" I asked. "I didn't know how," she replied. "And I was scared." "Scared of what?" "Scared of losing you." I closed my eyes for a moment. Because the irony of that statement was almost unbearable. In trying to avoid losing me, she had already destroyed our marriage. We talked for nearly an hour that day. There was no shouting. No dramatic confrontation. Just 2 tired people quietly acknowledging the truth. The truth that our relationship had been dying for months. And neither of us had been brave enough to say it out loud. 8 months later, our divorce was finalized. The process was strangely peaceful. Perhaps because both of us understood there was nothing left to fight for. The last time I saw Laura was when I returned to the house to collect my remaining belongings. She opened the door wearing a green dress I immediately recognized. It was the same dress she wore during our 10th anniversary dinner. For a moment, we simply looked at each other. So many memories existed inside that silence. Then she spoke quietly. "I'm sorry." I nodded. But some apologies arrived too late to change anything. I carried the final box to my car. Before closing the trunk, I glanced back at the house we had shared for 11 years. And then I drove away. That was 2 years ago. Life slowly rebuilt itself. I moved to another city. Started a new job. Made new friends. At first, everything felt empty. But time has a strange way of healing even the deepest wounds. Eventually, the pain faded. Not completely. But enough that I could remember the past without feeling broken. And through all of it, I learned something important. Love requires honesty. Without honesty, trust disappears. And once trust is gone, love cannot survive. Life lessons. Trust is the strongest foundation of any relationship. Once broken, it's extremely difficult to rebuild. Small secrets often grow into devastating truths. Silence between two people can reveal more than 1,000 words. Sometimes walking away is the only way to protect your dignity. The most painful goodbyes are the quiet ones where both people already know the truth.